Hello, everybody. Chris Mikowski of Emerging Civil War for the American Battlefield Trust, and I am in Dalton, Georgia. And we are getting ready to kick off the Atlanta campaign, heading from a very tumultuous, tense winter of 63-64 into some of the most pivotal action of the war. And to get us going this morning, I want to bring on my good friend, Will Greene, to talk about the site where we're standing and the house behind us. Will?
Hey, thanks, Chris. We're standing in front of what is known as the Cook Huff House. It was built in the mid-1850s and occupied at the time of the war by a man named R.L. Cook. This is the front of the house facing Selfridge Street today, but up until 1890, this was actually the back of the house. When the house was built, it was built to face the Western and Atlantic Railroad, which is just behind us here. Now, its significance, beside being an antebellum home, is that it was the headquarters for the Confederate commander, Joseph E. Johnston, from late December 1863 until the middle of April 1864, when he moved to another house here in Dalton at the eve of the beginning of the Atlanta campaign. Now, there are, besides Johnston's headquarters, which of course lots of things happen, all of the planning that Johnston goes into to prepare for the spring campaign occurs here. Of course, Johnston is thinking defensively. The commander-in-chief, President Jefferson Davis, is thinking offensively. And here is the beginning of the disconnect, which will continue all the way until July, when Davis relieves Johnston from command.
And let me ask you a little bit about that, Will, because Johnston's not necessarily Jefferson Davis's favorite choice, but he seems to be the best choice at this situation, considering the other options. But, you know, he's coming in to replace Braxton Bragg. What do you do in that situation?
There really aren't very many options. The first choice was William J. Hardee, who was one of the Corps commanders and a competent general. I don't think that anybody would place Hardee at the top of the list, but he certainly was a competent fellow. He didn't want a command of this incredibly dysfunctional army at the high level. So Davis is looking around at choices. Is it going to be Beauregard? Well, he doesn't like Beauregard either. How many full generals are out there? And Joe Johnston seemed to be the lesser, I would say the lesser of all the evils, is why Davis picks him. But they have a completely different philosophy. Davis is thinking offensively. He wants to take the Army of Tennessee north and regain all of the lost ground that had occurred in 1863. Johnston, correctly, believes that he does not have the resources, the horses, the men, the materiel to conduct an offensive campaign. And so, and Johnston is not a great communicator with Jefferson Davis. He just basically said, nah, I'm not going to do it. And they have a bad relationship to begin with. So this is going to lead to an unhappy ending for Joe Johnston.
And of course, Johnston twice before has had the opportunity to replace Braxton Bragg and has passed that up, and now he sort of has this thrust on him. And Johnston's been dying for a field command. He finally gets one, and now the question is what to do about it. I want to bring on my friend Chris White, because I know he's like one of the biggest Joe Johnston fans in the whole world, and I'm trying to say that with a straight face. What are you thinking about Johnston coming in at this moment?
Man, I have my Joe Johnston t-shirt under here. You can't see it. It's a little chilly, but it's like Superman. I need to rip it open. Joe Johnston is a guy who wants Army Command, but he doesn't want this Army. He wants the Army of Northern Virginia. He's a West Point graduate of the class of 1829. He graduates with Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee comes in second in that class. Joe Johnston comes in, I believe, 13 out of that class. And Joe Johnston, for his entire life, seems to play second fiddle to Robert E. Lee, and that is going to play a big role in how he operates during the war and then after the war. Joe Johnston can be a very jealous and petty man. He has a temper on him as well. At one point during the Peninsula Campaign of 1862, a wagoneer actually pinned his horse up against a fence. And he turned to Edward Porter Alexander and asked him for a pistol because he wanted to shoot the man. And Alexander said, I don't have a pistol, even though he did. And Johnston angrily rode ahead about an hour, beating his staff to his headquarters by an hour. So Joe Johnston's an interesting guy. He does have a temper on him. Can be jealous. He can be petty, but he is a competent general. He has led large forces. But there's an interesting point that Jefferson Davis made in 1862, in the midst of early 1862, when Joe Johnston decided to retreat from the Manassas line down to the peninsula without telling his commander-in-chief. Jefferson Davis reads this dispatch, and in the edge of this dispatch, he's going to write one word about Joe Johnston, and it's going to say insubordinate. That says everything you need to know about what Jefferson Davis, also a churlish and petty man, thinks about Joe Johnston. So when we come in here in 1864, these two guys do not like one another. William J. Hardee, he's a man in love. He's going to go on a 5-week honeymoon after he gets rid of this Army command. So Hardee, I don't want that. Joe Johnston, I don't really want it, but I'll take it.
And we're going to come back to this theme of dysfunctional command, which has been a theme for this whole Western trip. And we're going to talk a lot about how controversial Johnston's decisions are over the course of this campaign. Now, this house is not only the scene of Johnston's headquarters, but as Will's going to explain, it also has a really pivotal and interesting political moment that takes place here.
Absolutely. And I think maybe this is the most famous episode that occurs at the Cook Huff House. And it takes place on January 2nd, 1864. Now, by the time that the Confederate Army has been ousted from Chattanooga, it was only the latest of all of the disasters to the Confederate forces. They had lost 550,000 men by that time, and about 2/3 of their geographic territory. And consequently, Hardee made a proposal about enlisting black non-combatant soldiers and making them non-combatant people, making them part of the Army. And he also proposed to expand the age limit for actual white Confederate soldiers. Well, this proposal, very popular in the Army, went up to Richmond. Jefferson Davis kind of tabled it. He preferred to increase the Army by getting the deserters back into the Army, and so that proposal really didn't go anywhere. It was kind of a icebreaker for thinking about blacks, slaves, as a part of the Army. Hardee's proposal, non-combatants, but Army personnel. Well, meanwhile, while this is going on, Patrick Cleburne, an Irishman from Arkansas, so he's from a state that doesn't have a whole lot of political pull. He's also a foreigner, and that means that he doesn't have a lot of political allies. But he is sitting up at his headquarters at Tunnel Hill in late December 1863, and he's building on William J. Hardee's proposal. And he writes what will become a 20-page proposal that he submits to his brigade commanders, all of whom think it's a good idea. And so Cleburne goes to General Hardee and says, "General, would you ask the commander to have a meeting at his headquarters on January 2nd, invite all of the corps commanders and all of the division commanders, and I have a proposal to make." Hardee does this, Johnston accepts it, and so on the evening of January 2nd, 1863, in the dining room here of the Huff House, Cleburne appears. Now, only maybe Hardee knew what he was going to say. General Hindman, one of the division commanders, knew what he was going to say, but none of the officers were aware of why they were being called here. And so Hardee simply says, Johnston says, "Well, Hardee, tell us why we're here." Hardee says, "Gentlemen, General Cleburne has a proposal he would like to read to you." That's all he says. Cleburne gets up and reads his proposal for a half an hour. And he justifies the idea of enlisting slaves as real Confederate soldiers in return for giving them and their families freedom. Cleburne's argument is, look, there are 700,000 military-age slaves in the South, and they will fight for the Confederacy if they are promised their freedom. Otherwise, slavery has been a real albatross for us. And let's face it, black slaves are being used by the Union Army as soldiers. So it's a matter of whether they're going to fight for us or they're going to fight for them. Well, there was a hush that came over the room, and William Bate, Patton Anderson, and William Henry Talbot Shout Pouch Walker, all division commanders in the Army, were outraged by this, called it a monstrous proposal, outrageous. Joe Johnston agreed and told all of the officers, listen, suppress this idea. Don't publicize it. Let's just keep this incendiary concept between us. Well, Walker was so incensed by this that he disobeyed Johnston's orders. He gave a Confederate senator named Herschel Johnson a copy of, basically a paraphrase of Cleburne's proposal, and sent it up to Jefferson Davis. When Davis received this, he was just stunned and obviously rejected any idea of enlisting slaves. And so that situation would continue, of course, until the spring of 1865, when in fact the Confederates would authorize slaves as soldiers at a point when it was too late. And I think that many people believe that Cleburne's proposal here was one of the primary reasons why he was never given Corps command, despite being clearly the finest combat officer in the Army of Tennessee.
And I would just add on to what Will was saying about this is, this actually creates a rift within the officer corps of the Army of Tennessee, because Walker and States Rights Gist and some others will start calling Cleburne and a few of the other men who fought under him abolitionists, traitors. So this is yet another level of anger within them. And they kept this such a good secret. I believe that this letter wasn't found and put into the official records until 1893. It took that long to actually get this to light after the war. So this was not something that they wanted to talk about. But Cleburne, in fact, was a realist. He could see the end of chattel slavery coming down the road. He figured if we wanted to gain our independence, if we're the Southerners, we need to utilize what assets and resources we have. And in the end, it blew up in his face.
That's exactly what he said, Chris. He said, given the choice between independence and slavery, every right-thinking Southerner will select independence. That was his proposal. Well, the other significance of this site is the new location of a 1912 monument to the Confederate commander Joseph E. Johnston. And I don't know if we're going to be able to get. We got some good views of this statue. It was moved here last year in 2021 from its original location in downtown Dalton. It's a 15-foot high statue. It was financed by the UDC, United Daughters of the Confederacy, who still own the statue. This is not a municipally owned statue. And there was, of course, controversy after the George Floyd tragedy. And there were some protests here in Dalton about Joe Johnston and moving him out. There was a counter group called Don't Let Joe Go, who wanted to keep the statue where it was. But the denouement of all of this is that the UDC agreed, without any municipal interference or mandates, to move the statue from its downtown location to Johnston's headquarters here at a great cost of about $35,000 to get everything done here. And, everybody has opinions about Confederate monuments. It's been very controversial. But in my opinion, this is a real happy ending. You have the statue in an appropriate location. No protests here. Everything is fine. And I think it's probably better placed here than in downtown Dalton.
That's actually a very handsome statue of Johnson, a very excellent likeness of him as well. Now, as we get ready to launch into the campaign here, I want you to see Johnson is perched on a very high prominence in front of us. Like, maybe he's on top of Rocky Face Ridge. Now, I'm going to impersonate the Union Army for a second because there he is. I should be scared. Oh, look what I'm doing. I'm just going around the side. And we're going to see that throughout the day in the next series of videos as these two men, Johnston and Sherman, square off and try to play chess across northwest Georgia. And we're going to get all the way down to the gates of Atlanta. We want you to be with us. We're going to have Gary Edelman popping in front of the camera. He's been doing great work behind the camera for us. Chris White, Will Greene, I'm Chris Mikowski. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for supporting Battlefield Preservation and Education.